right, we are ready to start the meeting. We are streaming live, so just remember that if your mics are on, you are live and hot. I will turn things over to Chair David.
Thank you so much, Meg. Good morning, gang. Good to see all of you guys, even via Zoom. I hope everyone is healthy in this very, very difficult time again with COVID. Before we get started, let me cover a few of the ground rules. As always, we're being streamed live online, so please be mindful of that. Everybody, like Meg just said, look down and put your Zoom on mute so the people talking won't get interrupted with outside noise. If you want to speak, wave your hand. I think you can raise your hand via the Zoom button as well, and hopefully we'll be able to see you there. I'm trying to watch all these folks while I talk. Also, public comments can be made during today's meeting via open conference call at 888-204-5984, access code 1755460. I hope you all took that down. The information is in the notice meeting posted on the Regents website at regents.la.gov. Any public comments received we read during the meeting by the board secretary or designee. All public comments must include an agenda item number, a name, and a brief statement. Public comments are limited to 3 minutes per comment. All right, let's move on to roll call. Ms. Christine.
Regent David.
Yes, ma'am.
Regent Ewing. Regent Finley.
Here.
Regent Jackson.
Here.
Regent Levy. Regent May.
Here.
Regent McDonald.
Levy's here.
I was here. I'm sorry. I was...
Slow on the trigger. We got you.
Regent Meir. Regent Perez. Regent Pryor.
Here.
Regent Seal. Regent Solomon.
Here.
Regent Sterling. Here. Regent Temple.
Here.
Regent Weil.
Here.
Regent Williams Brown. Here. We have a quorum.
All right, thank you. And also today's meeting is a virtual one, so the certification of inability to operate due to lack of in-person quorum is posted on our website. Moving on to important things, the oath of office for Cameron Jackson. Welcome, Cameron. You're there in person.
Yes, sir.
Cameron serves as the student body president of Grambling State University. He was elected by the Council of Student Body Presidents to serve as our student board member this academic year. What an honor. At this time, I'd like for Bree Golden to please come forward and administer the oath.
Want me to also stand up? Yeah. Cool. Cool.
Go ahead and raise your right hand. I state your name.
I, Cameron Jackson,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
or affirm
or affirm
that I will
that I will
support the Constitution
support the Constitution
and laws of the United States
and laws of the United States
and the Constitution
and the Constitution
and laws of this state,
and laws of this state,
and that I
and that I
will faithfully
will faithfully
and impartially
and impartially
discharge
discharge
and perform all duties
and perform all duties
incumbent on me as
incumbent on me as
student member, Louisiana Board of Regents,
student member, Louisiana Board of Regents,
according to the best of my ability
according to the best of my ability
and understanding.
and understanding.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Welcome, Regent Jackson.
This right here?
Oh, you got to sign the line, huh?
Thank you.
Signing on the dotted line.
All right, now welcome, Regent Jackson.
Well,
So glad to have you here. In the spirit of Marty Chabert, our former chair, I mean, it's all about you. We need your voice. You've accomplished more at your age than certainly I did by the time I was your age. Congratulations on all of that, but we want you to be a real voice here. You have the same standing as any other Regent member. I'm assigning you to the Academic and Student Affairs Committee. That's right up your alley. Facilities and Property, the Legislative Committee, and statewide programs committees. We're anxious to have you go through these documents in preparation for our regular meetings and really get your input in the student side, because you have a perspective that we haven't had in a long time. And we definitely don't have today's perspective on students in our institutions. So thank you so much for being here. And I'm going to want you to give me a full report on that student perspective at every meeting. And hopefully you can give a few comments now that you're sworn in. Thank you so much, Regent Jackson.
Absolutely. Well, it is a pleasure to be here. I actually got the ability to participate in the Governor's Fellowship over the summer. And I was actually held under the Louisiana Department of Health. So I was able to come over here and actually have like some interactions already with Dr. Reed and the rest of the Regent board. And it was amazing. Like we already had like a big family bond moment. Outside of that, I'm very excited to talk about the specific topics that were going on now. Specifically as it relates to power-based violence and also COVID when it comes to student safety. So those are the two main things that we are focusing on in this meeting. And I think that's something exciting to get into and really focus in how we want to map what the year is going to look like for the students across the state of Louisiana. Other than that, I will definitely have that report for you our next go around for meeting. And I'm excited to be here.
Congratulations.
Thank you, Regent Jackson. There's no doubt that Dr. Reed's already playing favorites. It's I'm remote and you're in person. All right. All right. Any public comments?
Not at this time.
All right. Moving on to our special agenda. And again, we have a meeting in 2 weeks. This is our special meeting on power-based violence. Members, Commissioner Reed and our staff began drafting this policy the minute actually before the legislation was even passed, working on these issues. And then the minute the legislation was passed, directing Regents to update its uniform policy as a result of failures around sexual assault and harassment here in our state. They went right to it. We called a special meeting because we felt it was critical to have the new policy in place before our campus reopened in the fall semester in the next few weeks. And while the law prescribed a January deadline for having these new policies in place, we have training scheduled for next week for all of our higher education campus teams. We're part of that. All higher education board members and system staff as well. There's no time to waste when it comes to protecting our students. This is a big issue because we believe that we must set a strong policy aligned with new state laws, matched with the system and campus education and implementation to provide the tools needed to support our students. We all know the expectations, and as a higher education community, we must meet them. And really, we want to be the ultimate protectors. We want to go above and beyond. And that's why Regents really got people from around the country to understand best practices today, yesterday, and going forward to the future. So we could correct what we've gotten wrong and make sure we educate everyone in higher education, even beyond, students, teachers, parents, everybody on what's expected and what needs to be done. So let me turn to Dr. Reed so she can walk us through the draft policy and answer any questions we have. Thank you, Dr. Reed.
Thank you so much, Chairman David, to board members. Good morning. Our job at Regents is, as the chairman has said, to develop strong policies that result in high quality educational experiences for our students that are attending our colleges and universities here in Louisiana, like our own Cameron here. Parents entrust their students to us, and we have to make sure that we meet the moment. As board members, I know your expectation is that we do everything we can to make sure our students are safe and that we have environments where they can learn and grow and graduate. That is the mission. So we want to make sure that there's confidence in the work that we are doing. And we marry, as the chairman mentioned, education and prevention on one side with the policies that make sure that processes are there in the event anything goes wrong. So this requires a student-focused mindset. It requires a campus culture that cares, one that looks out for each other. And as we know, the legislature and the governor have sent a clear message. They expect us to do better, much better, and they expect immediate results. And we want to say to them, we hear you. The system presidents, the campuses have been fully engaged in this work. And I'm happy to walk you through this work product as they pull the PowerPoint up. I'll talk you through the policy immediate results. And we want to say to them, we hear you. The system presidents, the campuses have been fully engaged in this work. And I'm happy to walk you through this work product as they pull the PowerPoint up. I'll talk you through the policy changes, the major components, and the processes we adopted to get here. So if we'll advance to the slides on the policy. Next slide, please. So you have in your packet a dual policy model here. First, we have the new uniform policy on power-based violence. That is aligned, as was mentioned, to the state laws that have been passed in June of this year. You also have Title IX grievance procedure on sexual harassment policies. That one is aligned to the federal law. Next slide. So the major policy changes when it comes to the uniform policy are listed here. First, there's a significant extension beyond sexual misconduct in Title IX to something called power-based violence. And in the policy and in the appendix, you have the definition of all that is included in power-based violence. There are reporting requirements for employees. There's up-the-chain reporting for administrators. Employees who falsely report or fail to report incidents can be terminated. In terms of accountability from the institutional level, if the institutions fail to report their crime statistics twice a year and post those to their website, they can lose the authority to incur debt through the State Bond Commission, and the Board of Regents is asked to review that information to make sure they're timely and they're reporting. And then the policy also includes mandatory transcript notations, communication withholding provisions in the event students are investigated or found guilty of power-based violence and trying to transfer from their institution. The next slide speaks to the Regents' obligations. They are significant. First, the policy development, the policy approval, which brings us here to this special meeting today. Second, accountability. You see listed there all of the places where the Board of Regents needs to report to the governor and legislature regarding incident reports. Make sure that campus climate surveys are happening and that that information is shared and posted. Making sure that we are looking at the adequate number of confidential advisors beginning next calendar year. Making sure we're monitoring websites, as I just mentioned, to ensure crime statistics are reported and posted, providing staffing for the new power-based violence review panel. That legislation passed by Senator Barrow has a group of 20+ individuals looking at best practices and guidance around this work. And then, of course, we have training responsibilities annually, working with in collaboration with the Attorney General's office. So how did we get to the policy today? We've had a fast sprint for about a month and a half. We started with our chairman, Chairman David, and myself meeting with all of the system presidents and their board chairs on June 15th, 5 days after the legislative session ended. We are delighted and pleased to have Nina Gupta with us. She is an expert in Title IX and these issues with Nelson Mullins. And so she's been guiding the policy work, making sure we have it exactly right. And then the system presidents, we asked for a work team approach, a collaborative approach. And so they nominated individuals to participate in 2 work groups that you see listed there. The transcript notation work group, and then a broader policy work group. So we had registrars and campus police and academic officers and deans of students, individuals who do this work and understand the implications of the policy and the implementation challenges and opportunities, sitting with us, co-creating this policy as we move forward. And I think as we advance the slide, the policy is stronger because of that active and engaged participation. So the policy, the law requires the Board of Regents to establish uniform policies and best practices when it comes to power-based violence. The information you see listed under the Act are all of the items connected to the policy. The Roman numerals connect to the policy, and those are nested specifically in the law. The best practices speak to the kinds of granularity that many of the systems asked us to share. How do we address these kinds of issues, formal complaints, grievance procedures? And so we've stepped into that space as requested to make sure that we're providing as much guidance and support to make sure that we implement policies that will make a difference on our campuses. So you see both the policy and the best practices within the uniform policy before you today. I'll walk you through a couple of the key provisions. First, as I mentioned, this is nested in new state law. We elevated safety education because we know that it's important to have due process and procedures in place if things go wrong. We want to make sure we're spending robust time on the education and prevention to make sure things go right and that we're looking out for each other and that we're speaking to what we value on our campuses, which is safety of our students and the education of our students. The policy acknowledges the important relationship we have with our systems and campuses. We set the policy. We want to make sure it's as strong and robust as possible, but the policies have to be implemented and the campus culture has to be right. And that's where our critical partners, the systems and institutions must be at the table as well. The terminology, as I mentioned, is an expansion of Title IX and sexual misconduct. You see terms used here that are listed. The law and therefore the policy reflects express prohibition against retaliation for individuals who are in good faith reporting or cooperating with investigations regarding these issues. The next slide speaks to the mandatory reporting for employees. So every employee is a responsible employee. That means if they receive a direct report of sexual misconduct or power-based violence, or if they witness it, you see listed the items that they must report to the Title IX coordinator. The law and therefore the policy also lists the exceptions. So if you overhear a conversation, if an individual reports their information in an academic work paper, in an assignment, or if they speak about it in a public hearing, that's not considered a direct report. And so an employee may certainly follow up with an individual if they've heard something, but that does not represent a direct statement received to be reported to the Title IX coordinator. It speaks to the termination, as I mentioned. If you fail to report or falsely report, you would be terminated in accordance with the institution's procedures. And then we have best practices around making sure that a student is aware that you are a mandatory reporter, that a student is aware of the kinds of supportive measures, whether those are academic, healthcare, other measures to help them as needed. The next slide speaks to the significant up the chain reporting, the legislature wanting to make sure no one in this process could say, I didn't know. And so the policy has some specific information that has to be reported. You see icons of computer monitors next to the chancellor all the way to the Board of Regents. That symbolizes that not only do we have to report, but we have to post to our website. So we go beyond just mentioning in the policy the information that has to be reported. We've provided templates, forms for uniform and timely reporting. We've provided suggested deadlines to make sure we get this right. And we will work with our IT and the systems and campuses to automate the forms to make it as easy as possible to get the reporting in uniformly and timely. Transcript notation. We had a separate work group that was involved with the transcript notation. I believe it's pages 13 through 16 in the policy. And so the law requires the Board of Regents to work with the management boards to develop notation policy. As you know, the legislature was very concerned when they heard an incident of a student reported by USA Today that had hopped institutions and there was sort of failure of information sharing. And so they wanted to make sure that any loops that they saw were closed. And so this requires that a student who is subject to a complaint or found responsible for power-based violence, that they're trying to transfer, that their transcript is either withheld or notated. The registrars believe that they prefer withholding. We gave them the option, and there was robust conversation about how to get this right. Nina made sure that we had a communication piece, our expectation of the receiving institution who sees a notation, our expectation of the sending institution who placed the notation, and what information would be shared. We want to make sure there's an appeal process. And certainly we have shared this policy with our LACU partners because we want to make sure that private institutions are aware of it. And we're encouraging them to implement their own policy as well. A couple of other key provisions. There was lots of conversation in the legislature about MOUs between campus law enforcement and law enforcement in the community. And so now the MOUs must be signed by all parties. They must be in writing. They must be annually reviewed. There's a grievance procedure, obviously, in Title IX that is very prescriptive. We also wanted to make sure that our policy speaks to a process to resolve complaints. And then, as I mentioned, there's training responsibilities that the Board of Regents has to develop and initiate training, as you see, for confidential advisors, for responsible employees, and board members in the state of Louisiana, management boards and the Board of Regents are considered responsible employees. Therefore, training has been set next week for both campus teams, but also boards as well. Finally, data publications are required. As I mentioned, lots of information that has to be reported. And so that information is included in the policy, as well as the deadlines that we're required to meet. There are significant list of definitions that are included to make sure that we're uniform in our definitions, and then effective dates. Upon approval of this policy, the policy will take effect. The institutions and systems will work together, and no later than October 15th, 60 days or so, the institutions' policies will need to be implemented. And then the system boards will need to verify that those institutional policies are in compliance and fully aligned with this new uniform policy. And they will need to both verify compliance, but also share the policy with the Board of Regents once those policies have been developed and reviewed. Finally, just a little bit, Mr. Chairman, board members, about how we got here in this fast sprint to make sure we had these policies in place before the fall semester. And so you see on the policy process on the left side of the screen, the dates and the meetings that were held to get to this point, the notation meetings, the broader policy team, the briefing of the system presidents along the way, and then the timeline here for where we are today, which is a special board meeting, and then 2 trainings next week. Both will be on Zoom. We want to train safely, but we need to make sure that we have training on the new policies so that as we step into the fall semester, individuals have the information on which to move forward following both the state and the federal requirements. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll stop and see if there are questions. We do have a motion, but I wanted to make sure that we hear from the board. And then, as I mentioned, we have Nina Gupta with us as well, if you have questions of a legal matter regarding this policy. So I'll stop there.
Any questions from anybody? And Meg, help me see if people are raising their hands. Regent, wow, go ahead.
Commissioner Reed, it looks, this looks like a really good product that's been produced. The question I have deals with the relationship between power-based violence and the Title IX misconduct. At the end of the day, are we talking about one set of policies that the systems will produce that will basically apply to all power-based violence, which would include the Title IX? Is that the final? I had a little trouble seeing the interrelationship of the 2 concepts.
Sure. So we have a dual policy because we have to meet both the federal requirements as well as the state requirements. And so we discussed that and made sure we had a dual approach. So when the systems meet with the institutions to go over this work, they will have to make sure they too have policies in place that meet both the state law, power-based violence, as well as the Title IX regulations, requirements. Is that the question?
Yes, I guess the bottom line is then will the systems be producing one set of policies and procedures that will apply to really all of the state and federal requirements in one policy? Or would there be a separate policy for power-based violence as opposed to the Title IX misconduct? In other words, are we going to have one set of policies that are going to meet state and federal requirements?
You will have policies that meet both, but the policies are not the same. So for example, Title IX has a very prescriptive process for a hearing process to walk you through a grievance. Some of the institutions on the power-based violence side may want to do restorative justice or other types of hearings. So we wanted to make sure that we had a dual policy because the federal regulations, some of them are very prescriptive on what you can do, where the state regulations may be different on what the expectation is. And so that's why we have a dual policy recognizing that the laws are not the same. The end goal of safety of students is, and so we needed to make sure we address both. But Nina, if there's anything else you want to add on that, please.
Sure, thank you. The Title IX process really speaks to what happens after there's a complaint of sexual harassment as defined under Title IX. And the commissioner is exactly right. The federal regulations impose very prescriptive and specific requirements on how a complaint is handled. So we wanted to make sure that our policy spoke to that and ensure that institutions, when they do receive a Title IX complaint, follow those federally required procedures. Beyond that, though, anything that doesn't fall within the ambit of Title IX sexual harassment and prevention measures to prevent sexual harassment, sexual misconduct, and other forms of power-based violence in the first instance, institutions have a lot more flexibility on, guided by the state law. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Regent Jackson, do you have a question?
Yes, sir. So just speaking from the perspective of like a student leader, going back to the slide about accountability, the second bullet point, I actually appreciate that one a lot. It's developing like a climate-based survey, and it wants to focus in on those advocacy groups and also student leaders. My question is, how are we going to push that charge to make it serious for student leaders to really push it out to students themselves? Because I think it's one thing coming from a student leader, but we also need to get that perspective of students, especially the ones who are going through those situations. So I think that was my biggest question of like, what would we do with that?
Well, we have you.
Okay.
So we certainly, Regent Jackson convened all of the SGA presidents, and he'll talk about this at the bigger meeting around COVID. And so the ability to convene the student leaders as the student leader on the board is very important. And you're right, we want to make sure we hear from the student leaders on the questions, but also how to get more people participating in the survey.
Right.
So we actually get actionable information at scale.
Okay.
And so we're looking forward to that. We're required to have that in place in January or by January, I believe. And so we'll be working on that after we move this forward and certainly engaging you, Cameron, in that work.
Awesome. And then the last one is, are these going to be anonymous or like they open with people's name?
I believe they're anonymous surveys.
Okay.
Yes.
Awesome.
We want you to be able to share and be willing to share. I think Regent Finley.
Regent Finley.
I wanted to follow up on the survey comment. What's the mindset behind the survey that being done every 3 years?
I believe it's every 3 years. And so we had this, the legislature has gone back and forth between an annual survey. We had very, very low numbers. Tulane has very high numbers in terms of their uptake or participation rather. They do a 3-year survey. And so there was a thinking that this would give you an opportunity to get institutions involved, get students involved. Certainly, the institutions can do more surveying if they would like. But at a minimum, every 3 years, we needed to have a robust survey. And so we look to the success Tulane was having. We will certainly have them engaged in a conversation with us about how did they get such a strong participation. Some of that has to do with incentives for students, but I think that's where we landed in the law, which was to keep it at every 3 years.
Thank you.
Right. Regent Pryor? Oh, you're muted.
All right. How about now? Can you hear me?
Yep, got it.
It's not like an echo or anything.
There is an echo, actually.
Hang on a second.
Mr. Pryor, you okay? You got your hand raised, Mr. Pryor.
He's in surround sound.
Hang on a second. Maybe if I turn this.
Usually if you're on your phone, if you mute your computer and turn off your microphone.
Mute my computer.
Not the Zoom, like actually your computer. So it's not making any noise at a computer if you're using your cell phone.
Is this better?
Nah, it's still a pretty bad echo.
How about now?
All right, we're good to go.
Hey, Jennifer, can you show me how to?
It's good. We got it now. We can hear
You're
you.
great, Regent Pryor. We hear you just fine now. It's perfect. Put it back off. Take it off mute. You can talk. Oh, I guess I told him to mute his computer. Now he can't hear me. Anybody else have a question while we wait to get the technical difficulties resolved?
Okay, it should be ready now. Okay.
Is there anything else I need to hit?
Yeah,
All
there
right,
you
you're
go.
good. We can
Y'all
hear
hear
you
me?
just fine. We can hear you. We hear you.
You can't hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. They can't. I can't hear them though.
You can't hear him?
Yeah.
You got your volume turned up?
Where's the volume?
Okay. We
Okay, I was just going to mention. Okay. Sorry, y'all.
That's okay.
Is this better?
Yes,
We got
sir.
you.
Okay, I can hear y'all now. Can I hear them? Okay. Sorry, I apologize.
Go ahead. You're on. Uh-oh.
I can barely hear them.
We hear you loud and clear, Regent Pryor.
I can hear.
It's clearer now, but it's like,
Okay, let me go ahead and say I can't hear y'all, but you guys can hear me, Blake.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I was going to mention that I paid special attention to the appeals process. That that parties are offered an appeal, and in our standards, it just says they can only appeal based on the procedural irregularity or new evidence, or that the original decision maker had a bias, but that an institution may offer an appeal equally on additional bases. We had a situation at my alma mater at Vanderbilt University that was high profile maybe 2 years ago, where the Title IX office determined that a sexual battery occurred, but the district attorney's office in Nashville determined that it did not occur, and that it was consensual. And it caused a big issue because there was no appeal process for the student who was accused, and it was just it evolved into a lot of bad publicity and possibly some lawsuits on both sides. The female student who was the accuser, and the male student who the Title IX office said committed abuse, but the district attorney's office said was a consensual incident. So I was glad to see, and I hope that the institutions carefully look at that clause about when those situations happen, because there will be situations of a he said and she said, and there needs to be an appeal process. Maybe that's the university president or some final decision maker when there's an issue of conflict on accusations. And I want to say that. Last thing I want to mention is I see Javin Bowman behind you, Dr. Reed, who I saw Sunday at my church in Shreveport. He's our church pianist. And he's the student body president at LSU Baton Rouge. He's a first generation college student who is the SJ president and a member of Zion Baptist Church in Shreveport, as is Dr. Ray Belton, who's also in this meeting. So we have 3 members from our church in Shreveport on this Board of Regents Zoom meeting. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. I really appreciate our student leaders being here and being so focused on this. And thank you for your comments, Regent Pryor, about the appeals process as well.
Yeah, good to have our resident prosecutor's perspective there. Any other questions or comments? I'm not seeing, Regent Solomon, go ahead.
Thanks so much.
Glad you're on the mend, brother.
Yeah, me too. You as well. Dr. Hunter Reed and I spoke at length about this last week, and I've had all my questions suitably answered, but I just want to make a comment that I think is still maybe an open item, Dr. Reed, from what we talked about, that I'd like us to continue to think about how we extend the benefits of this policy and the protections of this policy, even to students potentially outside of the public institutions that we directly govern, but those potentially that we authorize to operate in the state of Louisiana. And I know that there's got to be some work potentially either legislatively or in looking at how the law is written that might ensure that those protections are provided for as well, and this process provided for in our proprietary schools and others. So it's a little out of our domain, but it's sort of adjacent to our domain. And I just wanted to flag that I hope aspirationally we can keep thinking about that as a way to make sure that all students in the state, not just those that are in within the 4 systems that we directly govern, have the protections of this policy available to them.
Thank you so much, Regent Solomon. We will certainly, as mentioned, we talked about this, we will certainly share the policy with proprietary and private institutions as well, and then continue tracking to make sure that we can advance this work. You're absolutely right. Every student in our state needs to be protected, not just those who have policy alignment to the Board of Regents. So absolutely agree with you on that.
Thanks so much.
Great,
Thank
great
you.
question. Anybody else? Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, members, do I have a motion to approve the dual uniform policy on power-based violence and Title IX, and to direct staff to work with the systems on automation of the forms needed for uniform reporting?
So move.
I have a move from Regent Levy and a second from Regent Weil. Is there any further discussion? Is there any opposition to the motion? Hearing no opposition, the motion passes. All right, so Commissioner Reed, I think the next steps include mandatory training that we're sponsoring. We talked about it a couple of times. Thank you all so much. We gave you, you might have gotten a little break in July, but you're not getting one in August. We're meeting today, we're meeting next week, and we're meeting the week after that. That mandatory training, though, next week will be nice because we'll get up-to-date information on the new policies and new procedures. It'll be live, even though it'll be off Zoom, and it'll help us to avoid those nasty online tests we've done for the last 4 or 5 years. We've done the same thing over and over again. So it's good to have some new information coming in. Is that right, Commissioner Reed?
That's exactly right. We have campus teams and we have board members. So we're looking forward to the training. And then, Mr. Chairman, if I know the system presidents are on, I just want to thank them for their active engagement and for providing work group members that were fully engaged, asking great questions and helping us to create something that I think is a very solid policy. So my appreciation to them.
Thank you. It's definitely a team effort. And I know we have shared it with the private institutions and encouraged them to adopt it as well. So hopefully, Commissioner Reed, we can get feedback from them in the next few weeks or next month to figure out if they're receptive to our suggestions. Okay, so again, next week, August 17th, all the boards will be on the Zoom, and then the 18th will be for the campus-based teams for the education. So that's great. COVID-19 update. Many of you have asked to get COVID update, and I'm pleased to have Dr. Joe Cantor has joined us by phone to share the latest. Dr. Cantor, thank you for your leadership in these tough times. We'd welcome your comments.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity, members of the board, to address you this morning. I do have to apologize in advance. I have to be on the road right now, so I'm calling from the road. If you have trouble hearing me, please let me know. And thanks again, Commissioner Reed, for inviting me to join. I wanted to give a very quick update of where we stand right now and give a minute or two if anyone has any questions. I don't have a lot of good news for you, unfortunately. We continue to be in the upswing of what now is clearly the fourth and the worst surge of COVID-19 that we have had to date, and the numbers really are just shocking. There's more COVID being diagnosed on a day-by-day basis now than there ever has been before. We were leading the country in new cases up until last night, when not by us turning the corner, but Florida has overtaken us as number one, but we're still going as high as we were before. Our percent positivity of tests being conducted is 15.4%. That's the highest that we've had since April of 2020, when we had 5 times less testing volume, so much artificially inflated. And what's of the most concern is the situation in our hospitals. Today, we will publicly report out 2,720 hospitalized patients. That's about 650 or 700 more than our previous max, which was the winter surge peak, where we peaked out at 2,069. So we clearly surpassed that. And if you talk to folks who help run our hospitals or work in hospitals, and I really encourage you to, because I think it will paint a full picture, it's a real dire situation. Not so much for physical space. Hospitals, it's a real dire situation. Not so much for physical space. Hospitals will make physical space where they can. They will double up rooms if and where they have to, but for staffing resources, there are just not enough qualified staff in the state right now to care for all these patients. Hospitals have engaged in rather drastic measures. Most have canceled non-emergent procedures. That clearly has consequences for those patients. And getting patients transferred from one hospital to a higher level of care at another hospital is very, very hard right now. And there's real consequences to that too. I can tell you just anecdotally, I'm an ER doctor in the off time, and I worked this past weekend in New Orleans, and we accepted a transfer of an acute heart attack patient. And this patient had to bypass 6 separate hospitals to get to us with an acute active heart attack, which means the outcomes are going to be worse for that individual. And these type of instances are just happening all the time. So that's the situation we find ourselves in. What's more concerning to me is we've not yet seen any real indication in the numbers that we're turning the corner yet. And this Delta variant has proven very difficult to model. The CDC has some models. There's some academic partners that have models. We have some in-state models that we've looked at from Ochsner and Blue Cross Blue Shield. And quite frankly, they're all over the place. So it's very, very challenging to model, and we've not seen any sign yet that we have turned the corner. There's no question that our relatively low vaccination rate has left us vulnerable, and states that enjoy higher vaccination rates are likely not to see a surge like this. But that is where we find ourselves. Very encouraging to see the systems that do have on-campus dorms commit to adding the COVID-19 vaccine requirement upon full licensure. I think increasing the vaccination rate on campuses will be the greatest thing to help ensure a safe and as normal as possible academic year in the medium and the long term. In the short term, we're going to have to mitigate our way out of this, which means strict universal masking, distancing where possible, and testing as well. So I should say we have seen vaccinations go up considerably statewide, about a 5-time increase over the past month. We're up to about 12,000 new vaccine administrations a day, and that's up from about 2,500 4 weeks ago. So that is encouraging. We hope that pace continues. There's no question it's being driven by people quite concerned, looking around and seeing people get sick. And you hate to see it come to that, but I do hope that we sustain that progress, because the general sense is we will remain vulnerable to these types of surges for the next couple of years unless we increase our vaccinations across the state. Commissioner, I'm going to pause there. Be more than happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cantor. Mr. David,
Yeah.
Chairman David.
Thank you, Dr. Cantor. Do you have any inside information on how far we are from FDA approval, final approval of the vaccine?
Nothing inside, but it's from everything that's publicly available, and I guess a couple of conversations with the administration, looking like within a few weeks. The FDA seems pretty committed to that. The White House is hinting that now. So I think it's safe to say that we'll have Pfizer receiving full licensure within a few weeks. Moderna and Johnson & Johnson will obviously be longer after that. And then we do expect to see at least Pfizer, maybe Moderna, have their emergency use authorization extended down to individuals 5 and up, probably before the new year.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cantor. Any other questions for Dr. Cantor while we have him on the line?
Dr. Cantor.
Regent May.
Just a quick question. Do you have a feel for when we might see the peak for this current surge? Is that difficult to predict, or something that we have some thoughts on?
Yes, sir. I mean, difficult to predict is really an understatement here. For example, the models that the CDC have now, I hate to even reference them because they're so inaccurate, and they paint a doomsday picture where we are only a quarter of the way up to where we're eventually going to go, and another month and a half of increase, which does not comport with other data points that we see. So I'm very hesitant to lean on them. I can't say when we're going to peak. I really, there's just no good model, no confidence-inspiring modeling to look at. I mean, I will say, God forbid, if we don't peak within a week or two, it's just simply going to be a catastrophic situation for hospitals. There's just no way to remotely sustain that. So that's, I would expect more aggressive mitigation measures to be seriously considered if we don't peak in the 1 to 2 week time frame.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Regent members, while we have Dr. Cantor on the phone?
Chairman
Regent
Duffy,
Sterling.
this is
Oh,
Terry Sterling.
Regent Sterling, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. So just want to echo to the board members the sense of urgency in support for masking and social distancing. I'm the interim CEO at UMC in New Orleans, where Dr. Cantor referenced. And we have a list every day of 30 to 40 patients who are trying to get to a higher level of care who we're unable to accept because of the number of COVID patients that are in our hospitals. And so I think people really don't understand the bigger implications of not getting the COVID vaccine, what it means to higher level of care for whatever is the illness that you may have. So whether it's any time sensitive illness of a stroke or a heart attack or something that you need to get to a high level of care, that's being impacted by every day and impacting lives. And then secondly, just to echo, our clinicians are exhausted. Much as you see today, you see on airplanes or in restaurants, individuals that are being abused because of the politicization of vaccines. It's interesting, these individuals, when they land in the hospital unvaccinated, that they really aren't very generous, many of them to our caregivers. Many of them continue to deny up until their death that they actually have COVID and their families. And so it's a challenging situation. You know, we're calling our clinicians to step up. They have been fantastic. But I think how we continue to respond if these numbers and some of these models play out, as Dr. Cantor characterized, really would potentially be catastrophic. So we appreciate those of you in the business community and anything you can do to support your communities in regards to good intermediate measures related to masking, vaccination, and social distances. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Regent Sterling, for that perspective, and Dr. Cantor. Commissioner Reed, anything else you want to add?
I would just say, of course, thank you to them. We are, as you know, on a return to fall trajectory for our students. Regent Jackson starting on Monday. So the campuses have their COVID protocols in place. They certainly will be masking. They're certainly promoting vaccines and testing. Campuses that need support around testing and vaccine locations, we're working with the Department of Health, the National Guard, and FEMA to try to make sure we have those co-located testing and vaccine sites on campuses. Students are being vaccine ambassadors. As I mentioned, our student member has convened the student body presidents, talking about what they can do to support this effort. And we're pushing a social media campaign, Mask Stop the Surge, Vaccine Stop the Pandemic, Students Do Their Part. So that'll be rolling out later this week. Certainly working with our system presidents, engaged with our campus leaders. It's an all hands on deck effort. We want to make sure our students have the opportunity to get a great educational experience. We have to address this pandemic immediately. As Dr. Cantor has mentioned, people are exhausted. The numbers are terrible. It's scary. But we've got to do everything we can, and we've got to work together. And so I really appreciate all of the healthcare heroes and the future healthcare heroes that we're graduating that are heading into the front line. Just very important.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Reed. And thank you, Dr. Cantor and Regent Sterling. It's tough right now. But yesterday I was talking to you, Commissioner Reed, or someone else, but I was looking on a local website, a state website that typically has conservative media, and the headline was that COVID was going down in our state. So there's misinformation everywhere. It's good to have doctors and scientists who are on this and telling us, you know, what their experience is, because you can't trust the internet, and especially if you're looking in certain areas, you're going to get just what you want to hear. Any other questions on COVID? All righty. We invited the system presidents to join us for our August 25th regular board meeting and add to the agenda so they can update you on their efforts to return to campus safely and the impact of COVID on higher education in general in our state. And so certainly more to come on this topic. think about questions that we're going to talk about then with our system heads. I'm excited about that and I've talked to several of you about the importance of making sure we have that conversation. Any other business before we move on? Sterling, I know you're busy and you probably can't enjoy a fun birthday tomorrow, but happy birthday early anyway. But I hope soon we do turn that corner so your life could slow down a little bit and you can enjoy your birthday, maybe a little late.
Thank you very much. They canceled. They normally have a big birthday party for me on my birthday weekend in New Orleans, Red Dress Run, which was yesterday. So that's always my favorite thing to do in our city on my birthday. So thank you for thinking about me, but my family then will have to step up their game.
I've never run in a red dress, but my good buddy, Judge Guy Holdridge, loves to run in his red dress every year. So it's where he stays this and that. Okay, any other business?
Mr. Chairman, can I just give a great appreciation not only to Nina Gupta, who's helped, but Brianna Golden on our team, Allison Smith. They have been 24/7 on the power-based violence policy and just want to personally thank them. You know, this is a big team effort and we're grateful to have an awesome team at the Board of Regents.
Yes, I'm so glad you did because they put so much work into this to do this so fast. This is much faster than we typically move, and we move fast as it is. So thank y'all so much. And thank you guys and everybody for attending on short notice for the special meeting. Remember, diary next week, the 17th, we'll do our education training. That's a couple hours. Then the week after that, we'll have our regular scheduled board meeting. Hearing no other business, do we have a motion to adjourn? Yes.
Motion to adjourn. For now, I'm on a job, Blake.
Thank you, Regent Temple. All right, we are adjourned. Thank you so much. Our next meeting, August 25th at 9 a.m. via Zoom, and our training next week on the 17th. God bless. Y'all take care.
Thank you.